Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Welcome to the Ankler Podcast. This is Elaine Lowe of the Series Business Newsletter, filling in for Sean McNulty this Thursday, October 10th. I'm joined as always here in Los Angeles by the Ankler himself, Richard Rushfield, as well as our executive editor, David Lidsky, dialing in from New York. All right, Richard, did you see the Joker Folie à Deux? And I can say that. I know Sean can't pronounce it, but I can, so I'm going to say that on the pod and brag a little. Or Megalopolis these past couple of weeks?
I saw Joker. I did not see Megalopolis.
Okay.
Megalopolis.
Yeah, Snuffleupagus, but it's all good.
David, did you?
No.
No, and I have to admit I did not. But that's not going to hold me back from having an opinion.
I have seen neither. So this seems kind of representative of their respective box office performances, which we're going to get into in a little bit. But before we talk about the box office, let's get into some grim facts here. Film LA. Yeah, no, don't you like starting off with that, David?
We'll start grim. We're going to work our way up.
We're going to start down. We're going to go up. So Film LA just released its big scripted content report this week. And the numbers, they're not pretty. Of the total scripted TV series distributed in 2023, these are U.S.-produced, first-run, English-language series. 105 of them filmed in LA. That's a drop, a nearly 23% drop from 136 series in 2022. And that actually pales in comparison to Georgia and the UK, which actually had steeper declines of 35 and 33% respectively. But on the flip side, New York and Ontario series actually increased nearly 8% and nearly 30% respectively over that same period. But, you know, Film LA President Paul Audley said in this statement that, quote, "We're now at a place where inadequate investment in this industry places other economic supports at risk." And Richard, how does that line up with all of the folks you talk to on a daily, weekly basis about the state of production in LA?
I mean, we've been reporting for 2 years here about all the pain and unemployment and hand-wringing, and there's less shows and there's smaller shows, and the ones that are less are being sent away. So that's the fact of things. And one of the things that a reader pointed out of the Joker backlash that we'll get to later is that the trades have been taking him to task for wasting all this money filming in Los Angeles.
Yeah, that just blew me away. Like that was one of the reasons for this being a disaster, was the most myopic possible take.
Wait, who's saying that and why?
In the trades, the postmortems on the Jokers, which we'll get to later on, but that has been a complaint in the litany of complaints about...
Yeah. Why did they let Todd Phillips film in Los Angeles? He should have filmed in the UK or, wherever.
And the significance of that to me is just that nobody can keep it in their head that saving LA production is a priority and important. And they can't even remember that they wrote a day ago that it was something we wanted to do, let alone stay with it. So that is how important that is to everyone all around the industry. And thus, production will flee.
Who will step up for Los Angeles? I mean, that's just what, and, I appreciate what Film LA does. So, obviously not all on them. But, there's no... is there not some major power broker that sees the value in Los Angeles as the entertainment capital of the business?
I mean, all the kind of moguls see it as, you can save money producing elsewhere, and got investments in all these facilities in Nevada now and everything. Yet our politicians, our mayor and our governor seem barely interested in the topic.
Well, this is the problem. I mean, there's no force to try to work against this trend. It was interesting to me in looking at the stuff as grim, in your words, Elaine, as the Film LA report, is. I mean, Los Angeles is still number one, but just,
But with an
declining
18%
share.
market
Yeah.
share. Yeah, you want to look at that decline in market share. It was 23% in 2021, which, yes, was still a pandemic era. But we're now down to 18% of that market share. We're behind British Columbia. And, talking about movies, at least within the theatrically released movies, there were 23 of the 2022 releases that were filmed in LA and only 21 of 2023 releases. And even though there was a more than 24% jump in theatrical movies released last year, LA still somehow has a smaller share of that pie now.
Yeah. So look, I don't want to put on my history major hat, but I'll do it. If you just look at the history, of urban centers that were sort of hubs for particular industries in the United States, it's like, yeah, there was a city, Pittsburgh, that was the hub for all steel manufacturing. That's where all the steel companies were, obviously, a lot of people had jobs. It was a very important industry. And then, people started to go, we could pour this stuff, anywhere. We could save 5 cents, moving it here. And, so obviously now Pittsburgh and whatever steel business there is a shell of itself. And same with the auto industry in Detroit. And I mean, if you hollow this out and you just pretend like, well, we don't need a capital, we can just be anywhere and do this, then you lose the entire plot and, the value of the industry to the country, frankly.
Throughout history, creative hubs have served as economic drivers of regions all over.
Yeah. I mean, y'all talked about it last week, with the AI stuff, but it's like, Governor Newsom made a decision more or less, with one particular AI bill that, Silicon Valley and keeping the people there happy was more important than keeping anybody else
And
happy.
Governor Newsom will make that decision, 100 times a day if it comes to his desk at Silicon Valley's priorities, Trump Hollywood's.
Yeah, I hear complaints about the tax credit all the time when I'm talking to producers and folks. But you want to contrast that with New York, which actually increased its tax credit from $420 million to $700 million last year. So it's not like other states aren't actively looking to court that production.
It's just the people who run Hollywood don't see themselves currently as presiding over this hub of creativity where gaffers live side by side with actors and hairstylists and writers, and everyone comes together and creates bigger and better things. They see themselves essentially as the bankers who can write the checks that can be done wherever by whoever, preferably the cheapest possible.
Do you really think that's the sentiment? Like, I would have thought there would have been more protectiveness over such an historical institution.
Show me who's making an effort to protect it other than giving it vague lip service and a little speech here and there.
Yeah, I mean, I also wonder if just the money is such that when you are at the top, and I've encountered, folks like this where you do stop thinking of yourself even as like an American. You just enter this sort of, rarefied air of that you're a global citizen.
Let alone a Los Angelino.
Yeah. So who cares at that point if it's in Las Vegas or London or Los Angeles or whatever? Who cares? As long as I live, up in Davos world, then doesn't matter.
And Los Angeles is the place where the people who write the checks and make the big money decisions keep their base office that they occasionally come to.
A lot of those numbers, too, last year, obviously are tied in with the two major labor stoppages. They were still feeling the impact economically of the dual strikes and the ongoing contraction. But I thought it was really worth noting here that those declines, they've already been happening since 2016. And Film LA president Paul Audley told Variety that he doesn't see any reason why things are going to get better this year. And, quote, they may be a little worse than 2023, which is kind of wild to think about, given that we're off of the hump of the strikes. Like, production should be back in full swing at this stage.
I mean, have you seen any head of any studio say that they're going to prioritize shooting locally? I haven't seen any declaration remotely like that. Even, empty lip service isn't paid to it. They see their function as making everything cost effective, which means chasing a tax credit and, if possible, ununionized labor.
Yeah, speaking of those movies shot at least partly in Southern California, going back to the Joker sequel, that was one of the few films that utilized LA. A lot of it was filmed in downtown LA. Although that local love didn't seem to do much for it at the box office, I mean, it opened to $37.6 million last weekend, and according to the trades, is looking at a 60 to 65% drop in its second weekend at best. And Megalopolis also didn't do so great, so much so that the New York Times ran a story a few days ago with the headline, "With Megalopolis, the flop era returns to cinemas." Like, I was wondering what your take was on that, Richard.
Well, the flop era is a great thing because the flop era means that you're taking big swings and you're trying lots of big things. And the era that we just came through was kind of the safe, predictable tentpole era with lots of well-known, well-established IPs. So the thing people don't get of like when you take big chances and big swings, this isn't like a fairy tale where it's pre-written that you take the big chance and then you win big every time. You win big sometimes, and you win big enough that, and those big wins are what move the industry forward. But if you're taking the big swings, it's not even going to be half the time. It's going to be some of the time, but those wins are so impactful and change everything. So the flop era is great, and we were pushing 6 months ago everyone to take chances and to do things different. So this attitude of beating up on a company for doing that, I don't quite understand the logic there. And besides which, on Joker 2, because they're making a very different sort of movie, but they were making a sequel to Warner Brothers' highest grossing film of 2019. It was the highest grossing R-rated movie in history when it came out. So it wasn't exactly taking a wild swing to say, let's have Todd Phillips do another one of those.
But as a musical, a big swing, which was a real interesting choice.
I think we need to make a distinction between an interesting flop, which I would argue both of these movies you could say are interesting flops, and movies that, I mean, first of all, like we're talking about it, other people are talking about it. How much conversation did Lionsgate's run of disappointments in the last 6 weeks generate? Or even in, May, in the Maypocalypse, no one was like, there wasn't that much conversation around Furiosa being bad. It just sort of came and went, So, like, I'm also, obviously, let's not go out of control with it, but I'm also going to come out as pro-flop in that, like, you got to try stuff and people are talking about it. And there's already some sense that, people are watching Megalopolis in a bit of a showgirls-like fashion that suggests these movies are going to be watched and studied and be interesting to people for a long time.
I always quote, there's a producer who said to me about 7-8 years ago, just as the streaming war was heating up, said, the company that wins will be the company with the greatest appetite for failure because they will find the success. And that has clearly been one company. Netflix has been the company with that willing to take the greatest chances and the greatest risks and do different things.
Well, but that's also different when you're talking about a company that doesn't have theatrical releases. Like taking a box office risk is a much different endeavor than releasing a movie a week.
I mean, budget-wise.
Oh, sure. $18 billion in content spend is nothing to sneeze at, for sure.
I mean, they make more movies by a factor of 5 or 6 than any other studio. So
the thing that I wonder, though, is like we talk about and we hear about constantly, all of us, when we're talking to folks around town, is that it's a very creatively risk-averse environment right now, right? But, like, has there ever been an environment where it wasn't risk-averse, Like, when was the last, like, flop era where they were like, yes, please, like, spend our money and make these big movies and take big swings?
I mean, I think that is very much true. No one ever was walking willingly into failure. But what was it we looked at this a few weeks ago? Was it we said number 13 before you go?
Yeah, the If was 13 on the list.
Before you go to get anything that's not an IP film? That's really low when you have entire studios that have stopped making comedies.
Richard, so let me ask you, I mean, as you noted, and I read some of them or heard some of them, the postmortems on Joker. I mean, do you feel like anyone is learning from failure? Or, because that's sort of the point, right? Like if you're going to try things and fail, then like you should study it in the effort to
you swing and a miss, you swing and a miss, you swing, and then the next one's a homer.
Yeah, you adjust your swing, right? Yeah, I mean, do you feel like anyone is learning from anything, or it's all just, sort of ass covering?
What would be the thing to take? All the postmortems I've read on Joker, they're takeaways of what Warner should have done. Like, I mean, one of them is suggesting David Zaslav should have been giving Todd Phillips notes on his completed film. Like, is that really what we're calling for? CEOs to give directors like notes on?
I thought that was the opposite of what creatives around here wanted.
Well, and also there's a lot about all the people that didn't give him notes. And it's just like, if you've seen the Joker, I'd like someone to tell me what are the notes that would have made this a different movie, like that would have turned this into Shazam or something. I'm not sure what that note is that they could have done a little tweak there. And what made Joker 1 a success was not that it was a studio product, that it was a really idiosyncratic personal film. Some people like it, some people hated it. It was very divisive. I'm sure if it was focus group tested, it would have done terribly along the way. But it connected it was a big swing and connected with a large number of people. So if you're going to go back to the well, that's what you're going to do again. You're going to give this director a chance to make his vision and see what comes out. And again, that's the thing about taking swings. It's not a fairy tale where you get an automatic ending, and then they made $2 billion and all lived happily ever after.
Yeah, and I say this as somebody who, full disclosure, has not seen Joker 1 or Joker 2, but just in terms of the reviews I've read and the reception I've read of having sort of a quirky musical version of this supervillain origin story. Yeah, I mean, isn't that actually sort of the safest way to take a big swing, on the back of an award-winning mega blockbuster to then sort of take a creative leap?
I mean, it's genuinely a weird film. It's like, it's
like weird good in your opinion? Like what was your takeaway?
It's more interesting than, just another installment of another long-running. I mean, it was someone's vision, and for me, some of it worked, some of it didn't, but it will go down as one of the odder studio films that have been made. And, good. I would say it shows that Warner's is out there taking big swings. I can't point to too many others on their calendar this year of the same sort, but if they do more of those, they will come up with more giant hits.
Yeah, and on that note, right, it's better for it to be a human-led creative disaster than, something built on AI, which is something that our own Eric Barmack has been exploring in depth with a fascinating 3-part deep dive into the world of AI at Hollywood studios and what that means for the future of jobs, how it impacts executives, spoiler, it's coming for your jobs, and how it'll permeate through everything from casting to pre-production, really.
My favorite thing about that was just it is a good example of the, I never thought the leopard would eat my face, if you're familiar with that meme.
I believe that's a traditional saying, David.
It was like, AI at first, it was like, AI is going to just, automate away all the sort of manual labor and, too bad. And then people realize wait, the creative jobs are in danger. And now it's like, wait, actually, it's the people who can write a report. What if we just had the AI do it in 10 seconds? And then, you figure out something else to do.
Yeah. I mean, everybody should absolutely read that. And if you have any feedback or any thoughts, or if you work on AI in a studio, we want to hear from you. We're at podcasts@theankler.com. And with that, let's take a quick breather, and we'll be back after the break with our London correspondent, Manori Ravindran, who will be here to talk about branded content in the UK.
TaxAct knows small business owners can sometimes use a little help with their taxes. That's why TaxAct has Expert Assist, a team of live tax experts ready to answer any questions you may have. Think of them as your own personal sidekick. Not like one of those funny talking animal sidekicks, more like the super smart nerding out on tax code and business casual attire sidekick, but just as helpful and lovable. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
Hi, I'm Elaine Lowe in Los Angeles, coming to you from the heart of Hollywood.
And I'm Minori Ravindran in London, reporting from the UK about the international market.
Together, we write the Series Business newsletter for The Ankler.
Series Business is a twice-weekly newsletter for paid subscribers to The Ankler that dives deep into everything you need to know about the rapidly evolving TV industry.
We've got an insider's perspective on where the jobs are, what's selling in the market, who's buying what kinds of shows, the new bottom line for budgets, and, of course, any and all industry shakeups.
Join us every Monday and Thursday for all the essential information you need for your job and career. Sign up to receive Series Business as part of a paid subscription on theankler.com.
Welcome back to the Ankler podcast. And hello, Minori. I know of the four of us here, Minori, you and I are the only ones who so far have seen Ali Wong's excellent stand-up special on Netflix. And
That's right.
And you and I are very curious about some blind items there.
I'm dying to know. I mean, the director, the surfer, the Japanese-American drummer. I mean, surely you guys are in LA. Like, surely you can uncover. These are the things that people, need to know.
I went down a Googling rabbit hole. I don't think anybody's uncovered it yet. Listeners, if you have any tips, again, podcasts at theankler.com.
I definitely Googled as well.
Elaine at theankler.com. Minori at theankler.com. Tell us, please.
Tell us.
But Minori, you're here today to talk to us about branded content, as we call it here in the U.S., and brand-funded entertainment, right? Is that what it's called in the UK?
Brand-funded entertainment, that's right. Also, ad-funded programming, also known as AFP. So, truly, if we can make it a little bit more complicated in the UK, we will.
But it sounds so much more official that way.
It does sound official. I still sort of, in my reach out for the story, I was like, oh, let's talk about branded content. And then was quickly shut down with, you mean brand-funded entertainment?
Now, is it because they think branded content is a dirty word?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, listen, branded content, I've lived here now for just over 8 years, and it's been around. This thing has ebbed and flowed. And I think it used to be really branded content. A lot of companies, not a lot, I would say, but a number of them had little divisions of branded stuff. But over the years, that's just kind of gone up and down. And now, I think that's the difference. It is really becoming pretty entrenched. It is interesting, though.
Yeah, it's not new, but tell us what the market for it looks like over on your side of the pond. Who are the big players? How does it manifest in people's programming?
Well, I think what's happened here really is, and I've written about this for The Ankler. I did a story about maybe a month ago around the erosion of mid-market, mid-budget programming,
right,
which is really lifestyle shows, which are quite big in the UK. These are effectively the bedrock of the TV industry here in terms of factual entertainment. And basically, broadcasters have just been like, nope, we're not funding those anymore. It doesn't make any sense to fully fund. And so that's basically where you've seen the brands come in and be like, this is me putting my hand up, we'll play ball with this. We can put some money in. And so that's really where we've seen the real rise, I would say. And I think one example, I would say ITV and Channel 4 have gone in pretty hard. ITV set up their own studio, B Studio, which basically now, they had 3 shows last year. This year, it's 15. So, they set up, to be fair, last year, but 15 is a remarkable number, and a number of them are being renewed as well. So it's doing well.
Oh, wow.
So, Elaine, you wrote about a couple months ago off of the report that Chick-fil-A, the U.S. Chicken sandwich giant, it was, perhaps getting into funding original shows, having its own streaming service even. And, what was the response of producers here to this? How do people react to that? How do you feel like that compares with what we're seeing in the UK and probably around the world?
Yeah, I feel like I was a little surprised reading Minori's story on it, and then went back and was like, wait a minute, I just talked to people about Chick-fil-A and expecting them to make fun of the idea of a chicken sandwich branded streamer. And instead, I got a lot of oh yeah, we're definitely, we've reached out to them. We're looking to see what kind of content they're looking for. Who knows if they're looking for family friendly content because of their brand, or if they're looking for reality, which it sounds like. And it's oh, there's actually a real eagerness to do this. And I don't know what part of it, well, it's a combination probably of we're kind of in a fallow period for the market. So there's an eagerness wherever there is a buyer. And also just the idea that branded branded content just isn't as much of a dirty word as it used to be, and everybody's acclimated to a certain amount of product placement. I mean, Minori, like for your average UK viewer, what do you think the tolerance is for something like that?
I mean, I feel like it's getting pretty high, you know? I mean, Cooking with the Stars is on, it just finished season 4. Channel 4 has this other show called Super Surgeons, which is funded, I didn't write about this in the story, but it's another big one here. It's funded by Macmillan Cancer Support, which is a charity, and it's a really great show, you know? I mean, the brands don't necessarily really need to be mentioned.
Yeah, if the show is good, do people care? I mean, Richard, do you care? Like, if you knew that this show was basically being put on by your favorite grocery store, you know, does that matter to you?
In theory, I don't, but that's never what happens. Like it's never a good show. Maybe once, maybe once in a blue moon. Like their priority.
I think that's a little strong.
If your sole focus as a studio is to make great entertainment, you succeed like 10% of the time. If your sole focus is to make great entertainment and advertise chicken sandwiches, you'll succeed, I don't know, 1% of the time? That's what I'd say.
Oh, but that's only under the assumption that making content is such a noble profession and isn't at all influenced by the money. Like, it all is to some extent.
When you're making a TV show, you're trying to make the most entertaining TV show that you get. That's
right, but there are also like parameters that people are used to having, like you have a certain amount of budget.
And with this, you have all those same parameters, plus talk a lot about chicken sandwiches and how much you like them. I don't know. Just show me the examples of the great ones, and I'll love them. But I
mean, Richard, the very idea of the way like 22-minute sitcoms are structured is around ad break. So it's not like product has never impacted the way creative is done. And, you know, a lot of great television has still been made in that format.
There's a difference between breaks and like work GE into the plot line, or that and we'll be back in 3 minutes. And now a word from your sponsor. Listen, I don't think it's impossible. If someone can do it, against it. The track record of branded content is that people do these experiments and they realize it's what they produce is not very good and it doesn't tend to attract many viewers. And that's why, you know, 40 years later, Coca-Cola doesn't still own Sony.
So, not to turn you into a straw man, Richard, but the Minori, and I ask you to, Elaine, one thing that in conversations I've had with people just around this topic and conversations with people from the advertising and marketing world is that, they do a lot of, very interesting, creative work that does, get people's attention and people care about and they talk about that is purely ad driven. And so, they are capable of doing stuff and having good ideas. And they are finding that in the conversations I've had that, those ideas are not necessarily welcome when they're interacting with Hollywood people. What perspective do y'all have from, either talking to marketers or having a sense of, basically just how much are producers who are even receptive to the money, are they also receptive to the creative partnership?
I don't think so. I mean, I think producers are definitely still kind of going about this sort of the wrong way in a pretty non-collaborative way. I spoke with Ravi Amartunga Hitchcock, who's effectively, he runs a creative agency out of, he's British. He used to actually work for Channel 4 about 8-9 years ago and is now in the Netherlands. And he's just like, these people have no respect for what the ad world is doing and on his side of the fence. And also, I think he works with really big brands like Nike and Gucci and WeTransfer, and they are making, they don't care about the UK necessarily. This is like a very small, insular, inward-looking market. They need to be international, truly, right? And so his take on it, I thought was really interesting because he was just like, linear broadcasters in this country, as in the UK, have just missed the boat on this. The brands that he's working with will be chasing audiences on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram. They're not interested in partnering necessarily with ITV. I think with this type of content, I think it really works with lifestyle, right? There's clearly a gap here in terms of funding for some of the broadcasters here. And that's where brands are stepping in and I think it makes sense. Like, I agree with Richard, but I also do feel as though there is that turning point now where we are seeing these shows coming back. And that's a sign that they're doing well, right? That they're rating and people don't necessarily care. I think the parameters are where it's never going to be risque. Political statements aren't going to be made. It's not going to be edgy or confrontational in any way. This is just like basic lifestyle programming. So I think for the purpose of funding that, like, by all means, like, let's move forward with brand funded entertainment. I think it's here to stay. But I think for the really good stuff, like programs that really move the dial, I'm not convinced that this is necessarily. And I don't think, and it shouldn't be really. We shouldn't really have brands anywhere near something that is going to do that, I think.
Well, I mean, you say that, but, at the same time, and these are both examples from your story, but, Patagonia, which is a, mission-driven company, is making original documentaries about the climate crisis and, the sort of effects of capitalism on the fate of the planet. And I can't remember the name of the show, and I apologize, but, the environmental show, geared towards 5-year-olds. There are things, that's not something that most brands want to go near.
But what those things are, they're not doing shows about Patagonia.
Right. So it shows that it's possible.
Right. But that's the concept.
TV News was originally sponsored by Camel cigarettes. It was the Camel Caravan of News back when. So it's like you can be an advertiser if you're doing great things and you're just sort of putting your brand around the frame of it. That's not new, and that's been happening since the beginning of film entertainment. I am open to, if someone appears on my doorstep and says, you got to watch a new episode of the Chicken Sandwich Show. I will. I'd love.
See, but I think you may not even know that it's the Chicken Sandwich Show. Is I think where things are going. I mean, obviously the brands want to get some attention for it, but then get attention for it in their stores or in the grocery store or wherever. And I do feel like things are getting more sophisticated, and that's money that can fund entertainment that we should generally be welcome to. to the idea that, LVMH or whatever companies that have a lot of money, want to be in the entertainment business.
The thing that I don't even know what it is. It doesn't actually suggest Oppenheimer level of engagement I'm having with it. So something might pass by and get my attention for 40 seconds. It might be just fine.
See, Minori, I think you mentioning that it's really impacting like lifestyle entertainment, like as somebody who avidly watches like the Food Network and HGTV and that kind of programming, like I think there's been a built-in tolerance to this kind of already product placement. It's like, yeah, when I know when I watch Alton Brown hosting Cutthroat Kitchen, I'm going to see a lot of product placement and close-up shots of the Capitol
for sure
oven or whatever, right? So it's like, I accept that. I don't love it, but I accept it. So it's like, where's the, sort of like, I guess it's a slippery slope of like, well, sure. And then next up, it's like, I guess I'm kind of accepting of the fact that Google is a title sponsor of Emily in Paris. Like, how many people really have objected to it with them being a title sponsor in season 4 versus all the other seasons when it wasn't? And so like having it bleed over into scripted TV in that way, yeah, like it's like, am I crazy about it? No, but do I accept that it's kind of here to stay and so far doesn't seem to be impacting the creative negatively? Like, yeah, sure.
Definitely. And it is actually encroaching into scripted in a pretty big way. I mean, I'm researching a story right now around MIPCOM, which obviously includes, that's the international TV market, by the way, that's happening in Cannes in a couple of weeks. And I'll be on the ground there. But I'm speaking with big distributors and they're all talking about this, right? Because the distributors in the TV side, the international TV distributors, are also being treated as ATMs, right? Producers are sort of going up to them and being like, all right, you're going to fund my show. And they're just like, we're not a bank. We maybe used to be a bank, but we're not really that anymore. We need help. And so they're also looking to brands. It was really interesting. It's been fascinating to hear a number of them actually mention, we're looking at scripted too. But I think it's that scripted is so expensive, right? These budgets are insane right now. And obviously there is that correction now, which is a good thing. And certainly in the UK, we're seeing that as well. But what they're saying is, if it's a brand coming in for like a few percentage points of the budget, then maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what it's what it's going to take to make these shows going forward. So,
I've always I remember when Apple TV Plus first launched, the passing thought had floated through my head of I wonder, when you watch the morning show, there's a lot of at least in the first season, there's a lot of close-ups of iPhones and things. And I was like, oh, I wonder what the intersection of this is. Are these just purely creative choices? Is there any kind of mandate, which, I understand that there isn't, at least that's my understanding of it. But yeah, you kind of wonder how these things sort of blend into each other by osmosis.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. I feel like in a year or so, we'll probably see more manifestations of this in the scripted world. That's beyond just product placement and whatnot. I think there's definitely more to come, for sure.
By the way, I can't believe you guys are all making me the capitalist apologist here in this discussion. It's
Well, I feel like I acquitted myself well there in defending brands, participating in entertainment. So I'm
just let the chicken company make shows.
But in Los Angeles, see, we tie it.
But in Los Angeles, make sure the money stays local.
There we go.
All right, so moving on, Richard, you have a new column out about, full disclosure, Minori and I are both Penske Media alum, and you've got a new column out today that touches on this company. Tell us a little bit more about it.
So I stumbled on a little thing that happened. For those of you familiar with our trade publications of the Penske Media octopus there, you might have noticed they occasionally dip into coverage of the awards sector by doing roughly a zillion articles on every single time any fourth tier, the Critics' Choice Awards, puts a new sign on their bathrooms or something. It gets blanket coverage in all the trades. So the Golden Globe Awards, which is now owned by Penske Media, which owns all these publications, in particular, have traditionally in the last year, given, shall we say, heavy and highly favorable coverage to the doings of the Golden Globe Awards. But remarkably, I just discovered on their website, they announced back in August 2nd, that they had just given a new award. A new award had been created.
What was this award called?
They created the International Icon Award. What the qualifications are for the International Icon Award, I guess being iconic and being international. So
it's all just right there in the name, Richard. So yeah, what more do you need? Why do you need an explanation?
All right, lots of good candidates to choose from then.
So they announced that this award had been created. No explanation of what the qualifications are for it. No explanation of the process of how the award is given. But it was created and it was given to Sharon Stone in a ceremony, they said, that happened last night in Bodrum, Turkey. Bodrum being the yachting capital of Turkey. And there, if you looked on the Instagrams of some of the Golden Globe members, you could see it looked like a fantastic event with lots of yacht parties and everyone flying in on private jets and just where else would you rather be? So for the Golden Globes to have a gala and it not to be covered in Penske Media, I think is, it's
unusual.
It's like saying the sun shined, but the light didn't reach the earth or something. It defies the laws of physics.
So what accounts for this mystery then, Richard?
Well, I can only guess. I don't have an answer to that of why they decided to announce the event after it had happened and then not ask your papers to cover it. But the fact that it took place in Turkey, which is a country that has largely hostile interests to the United States, as their quasi-dictator, Erdogan, is not friendly to the Jewish people, shall we say, and has been working against the United States on any number of fronts. So, it's possible that Penske Media thought throwing a big, giant gala International Icon of the Year party with him was not the foot they wanted to put forward as they're trying to lure Hollywood back to the Golden Globes after still coming back from the boycott there. One can only guess. But we can say that there is a comp because just 2 weeks before this award, Sharon Stone was given another ridiculous Lifetime Achievement Award.
She's very busy. She had a very busy summer collecting awards throughout Europe.
By another festival, an Italian festival, and that got coverage on all the trades somehow. Just the announcement that was going to happen. So,
so the mystery deepens.
But for some reason,
Look, it was 7,000 miles away, and don't you worry about it here in Los Angeles. That seemed to be the subtext, right?
don't you hear about it in Los Angeles? I mean,
Could it have been some of your own coverage, Richard, that maybe has precipitated this sort of low profile? I don't know.
I mean, no one is more supportive of yacht parties and stars of the 90s flying on private jets than I
Listen,
am.
folks,
So
Richard loves a yacht party with past hors d'oeuvres.
yeah, so I would have been all for it if they had told me. I would have said that sounds fantastic, but they didn't tell me. So I can only wonder why.
Well, if anyone does have any answers, Richard, your bat signal,
Yeah,
but
that's
literally on the app signal, is loud and clear in this column. There's a QR code as well as your user handle is richardrushfield.77 if anyone wants to reach out to Richard with more.
Or you just email me at richard@theankler.com.
Oh, yeah. If you want to be, straightforward about it, sure.
Like what? Again, speaking of the 90s, like sure, just send an email, but hey, we've got a fancy QR code in the story. Come on.
Or find me at my corner table at Mame's-on. Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, if there are any other enduring mysteries that you want us to probe into, listeners, you know where to find us. Again, that's podcasts@theankler.com. Although why I keep hawking that email address that I don't know if anyone has checked over the last month is beyond
who
me.
has been on this podcast, checks the
okay.
email.
Oh, wonderful. Somebody's on it. All right. Let us know. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Go to theankler.com to subscribe to all of our fine newsletters and find us on social. Largely, I think, at The Ankler is our user handle. Thanks so much for joining us this week, Minori. And thanks as always to David and Richard from our team here at The Ankler. Thanks for listening and see you next week.